When I was 16, some friends and I went to an outdoor concert festival type thing. We parked at the mall and took a shuttle to the venue. For perspective, the mall is a 20-minute drive from our homes and the venue is another 20 minutes away in a different direction. During the concert, I ended up losing my friends in the crowd. I didn't care much as I wanted to get to the front, and I could just call them after the concert had ended. Well, of course, I lose my phone somewhere in the sea of people, and don't even notice until the last show wraps up. I search the ground as the people dissipate with no luck. Reluctantly, I just hop on the bus heading back to the mall, hoping to meet them at the car. The car is gone and I start to freak out a little bit. It's 10 p.m. when I head to the bus station to see when the next bus to my city is coming. Just my luck, it happens to be Memorial Day, so no buses until 10 a.m. I borrow a stranger's phone and call the two numbers that I know, my mom and brother. My mom doesn't answer, but my brother does. He basically gives me the sex to suck talk and hangs up. So I'm alone, scared, and a little drunk in a city that I don't know. I try walking, but quickly give up when I realize that I'm basically walking down a random highway toward who knows where. Back at the station, I'm just staring at the map when a stranger creeps up behind me. He asks me where I'm headed and I tell him the truth. He conveniently is going to the same city and asks if I would like to split a cab. Realizing this is my only option, as I didn't have enough of my own, we get in the car. It turns out that he had even less than I did. We barely have enough to get to the heart of the city, which is a 10-minute drive from my house, but at least I know my way home from there. During the drive, this guy gets progressively more creepy. He's aware that I'm 16 and he's 25, but he scoots closer every minute, touching me, insisting that I come back with him to his place, and even writes his phone number on my bare leg. As we get there, I realize the situation that I'm in. We were about to get out into this quiet area at 2 a.m., and the cabbie is going to drive off, leaving no one here to hear me scream. The second that he gets out, I turn to the driver and beg him to take me a few streets further, so I can at least put some distance from him and me. The cab driver hadn't said a word the whole way, but he definitely heard everything. He asked me for my address and he drives me all the way home. The creeper watches as the cab drives off, with me still inside. When we got to my home, I offered to wake my mom up to pay him, but he declined, saying that he's just glad that I'm safe. I broke in through the kitchen window, got to bed, and cried my tears of relief for who knows how long. This happened to me when I was a kid, 10 to be exact. I grew up in a military family and lived in the Middle East for a significant portion of my life. Because of this, we traveled frequently to different countries because of the low cost and proximity. On this particular vacation, we flew into Cairo, Egypt, for a long weekend, and we only lived like 2 to 3 hours away. It was late at night and we were staying at the Marriott Hotel, which had a taxi shuttle service that was supposed to pick us up. For some reason, our driver never showed, so we were forced to take a regular cab to take us there, which took forever to find that late at night. We finally found one that was offering us a pretty good deal. They don't run by meters, instead they just give a flat rate that they choose, and headed towards the hotel. Out of nowhere, another taxi basically T-bones us in the middle of the road, causing us to stop. There aren't really defined roads in a lot of Arab places, so it isn't really that surprising that we got hit. In Arab nature, the two drivers get out of the cars, each yelling that it was the other's fault, and looking like they were going to throw hands. Eventually, they got back into their respective taxis and parted ways. My family and I were completely taken aback. We had been in Egypt less than 2 hours and have already had quite the adventure. We finally got to the hotel, exhausted as it must have been at 3 a.m. by this point. Our driver helped us get all of our bags out and get settled, and told us that he felt so bad about the car accident that he offered to pick us up the next morning and take us to the Great Pyramids, which was on our agenda for a super cheap rate. My parents agreed and decided on a time for him to come, though I can't remember when. Flash forward to the next morning. Everyone is ready for the day, excited to see how crazy it was going to be. Our driver was outside waiting for us, leaning against the car like someone in an old movie would, right when he said he would be there. I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl that had a deep tan at the time, and being in Egypt, that was a rare sight. When the driver saw me in the daylight, he gave me the creepiest, most unsettling look that sent chills down my spine, even as a 10-year-old. I knew something wasn't right with him. Nonetheless, we got in his taxi and headed towards the pyramids. He continued to try and talk to me and joke around with me the whole ride, something I found to be extremely creepy and bold since both my parents were in the cab. We get super close and there's an entrance that people can go through and walk the long distance to the pyramids, and there's an entrance that taxis can go through. You have to pay to see them. It's strange but true. Our driver keeps making jokes about my blonde hair and blue eyes and bringing up that he could get me into the pyramids for free, so my parents wouldn't have to pay the extra ticket price. We laughed it off and my parents paid him and said thank you and began to exit the taxi. I don't remember how it happened, but at some point after I got out of the car he did too, and he directed me towards his trunk. I was confused and thought that we had forgotten something, so I stayed behind as my parents walked towards the gate to get whatever I thought we had left. The driver pops the trunk, but there wasn't anything in it. He grabbed my arm and put a hand on my back, trying to push me into the trunk, and said, "I'm getting you in for free," over and over again as I resisted. Naturally, I freaked out and screamed out to my mom and dad at the top of my lungs, terrified. When they heard me and noticed that I wasn't behind them, they started sprinting back to the car. When the driver heard me scream, he immediately let go of me, closed the trunk, and drove away just as my parents started to run to me. I was crying my eyes out, terrified out of my mind knowing that a taxi driver tried to put me in his trunk, and drove away the second that I screamed for help. It's scary to think what could have happened to me had he been stronger and more prepared, or faster. He is the reason that I am still terrified of taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, and any car service of that nature. This happened quite a while ago. My lifestyle at the time was very high risk. This story means a lot to me as it restored my much-needed faith in humanity. To explain why this incident meant so much to me, I need to provide a bit of backstory. I live in a really sketchy part of town. The particular building I lived in was a refurbished loft type with a very ugly history. You could still see the damage in the concrete walls from all the gunfire that it had taken at one point. Talking the pizza guy into delivering was always fun. "No sir, it's not still a crime scene. Yes, real people live here." There was a local gas station within walking distance. Your typical shady place populated by shady people doing shady things. I had and still have a tendency to be somewhat chatty and polite when spoken to by strangers, especially if I frequent that store and see them often. I wound up making friends with a man named Houston, who had a talent for obtaining recreational plant life. We would hang out and philosophize about life and the like. I just felt like he had a good soul. I was coming home from a bar that I frequented one night. It was a Friday and that area was a popular night spot, so at closing time cabs would line up. I was quite drunk but sober enough to know better than to drive. The cab driver was talkative and I was not. I just wanted to go home and watch the world spin. Almost immediately out of his mouth came some of the most lecherous and disgusting things I'd ever heard. He would arc his neck around while driving, lick his lips and say just horrible things. And the worst part was not only did he have me in a moving vehicle, but he knew where I lived. I had no phone and just enough money for the ride home, and I was terrified. "You want me to pull in so I can lick you?" "No thank you, I'd like to go home and vomit." Being the smartass that I was, I said that. It was as if I hadn't said anything at all to the man though. He kept turning around and reaching out to grab me as I swerved out of his reach. "Hey, show me him, I want to see him." The situation escalated when he started to drive around aimlessly, pulling into dark complexes and slowing down to try and grab me. I had to do something, So I did something that I don't think he was expecting. I flirted with him. I leaned over the front seat and gave him my best drunk and seductive face and said, "Do you want a party?" He stopped, looking blank for a moment before a huge grin widening across his face. "Oh yeah, where do you want a party? You want a party here?" He started to adjust himself and I wanted to rip that frickin' thing off. "No, not here. Let's get some beer and go to my place." He agreed and I led him to my local gas station. "Pull in here and I'll go get some. What do you like?" I said sweetly. He said he didn't care and as soon as he parked I grabbed my bag and got out. He sat there waiting. My voice must have had an obvious tone of panic as I asked the lady behind the bulletproof glass, "Is Houston here?" She looked concerned and shouted for him. He came out from the back. I was so relieved and in one hysterical breath, I told him everything. The expression on his face darkened, and he said to me very curtly, "You stay here." I walked to the window as he exited the store. He took 3 steps outside, whistled, and with arms out on either side, he made a "come here" motion. Out of the darkness came 20 really scary guys from both sides. He pointed to the cab and said something that I didn't quite make out. Whatever it was, they swarmed the cab and they tried to flip it over. That cab burned rubber peeling out of the parking lot. The men then looked back at the store window in Houston, laughed, nodded, and they disappeared back into the darkness. It was surreal. My jaw was on the floor and Houston came back inside with a grin. I don't think he'll be back. I couldn't thank him enough. He was my hero at that point, hands down. It had started to rain, so he and his friend walked me home under a giant umbrella. There are no words to describe the restoration of my faith in humanity that night. Cliché as it sounds, there really is light in the darkest of places, and kindness in the most unexpected of places. In 2019, I moved to a post-Soviet country for work. And there's this American diner that I always go to on Saturdays for lunch. It's a one-of-a-kind place in the city, owned by this half-Cuban dude who loves the US. Not surprisingly, this place attracts lots of American expats who want to feel home. It takes me around 25 minutes to get there walking from my apartment, but as it gets extremely cold during the winter months, I always take a taxi that drops me off next to a big mall, on the opposite side of the narrow street where the diner is. It's hard to describe it, but the best way to reach the restaurant's entrance is by crossing the fenced garden of an old wooden church. It's an Orthodox church from the 19th century, turned into a museum, and it's surrounded by massive office buildings. The garden is small, so you can cross it in 3 minutes, and the exit gate faces the restaurant. During the winter, snow covers it completely. So, it was a Saturday morning, January if I recall correctly, and the snow was fresh on the floor. I was walking to the diner when I noticed unusual footprints in the snow, as if someone had been walking in circles back and forth for a long period. But there was nobody around and all of the office buildings seemed to be closed. I keep walking. All of a sudden, a man that was hiding behind the church reveals himself. He doesn't look hostile, but there's something extremely odd about him. He's wearing baggy jeans, a dirty hoodie, and a blue cap. It was extremely cold and his outfit was not the best for the weather. He approaches me smiling. He starts walking to my side. "Hey there." He spoke in English too. "Hey, where are you from? Don't be afraid. I like foreigners." The vast majority of the population there looks East Asian, so it's easy to tell that I wasn't local. And his English is surprisingly good. I keep walking on in silence. "No, you don't need to be afraid, my friend. I'm part of the couch surfing community. I'm a nice guy. Look." He tries to show me something on his phone, maybe his couch surfing profile page. "Would you stay at my place?" he says. No dude, thank you," I say. And then he goes. Well, okay, but would you give me some money to buy us both coffee? You don't have to come with me. At that moment, I was already in front of the restaurant and casually opened the doors to enter. He didn't follow me. 2 weeks later, same Saturday routine, lunch at the diner and then back home. On my way, I decided to grab a coffee at a nearby place. As I'm walking to the shop, I feel someone following me. It's him, again, and he's wearing these same clothes. We make eye contact and he starts laughing, and then proceeds to do an extremely creepy thing. He hides behind a bus stop that has glass panels on the sides and keeps staring at me. I could still see him, but he was being a complete creep on purpose. I enter the coffee shop and tell the barista, "Hey, there's a guy following me." The girl looks at me worried and says something to the security guard. It's common to see guards in the shops around here. The guy enters the shop. The moment the door closes behind him, the barista looks at the guard who immediately removes him from the place. They were so fast it almost seemed as if they knew him. Thankfully, I never saw him again after that. So, I had just moved to New York back in July from Mississippi, and hadn't had any problems living there until this January. So, I go to a high school that's maybe 10 minutes away driving from my house, and I take the bus every day to and from school. Now usually my mom will pick me up from my bus stop and take me home, and I usually only have to wait like a minute or two. This day, I was waiting for like 10 minutes and I called her a couple of times and she didn't answer, so I assumed that she had fallen asleep like she does sometimes, so I decided to walk home. I usually go in a straight line for about 3 streets and then make a right and walk straight down from there. On this day, I was wearing a tank top with a jacket on, Batman pajama pants and old school style Vans. The perfect outfit for walking in the snow, right? Anyways, as I'm walking straight down, I see a man who is out in front of me and walking the same way as me, so I take that right turn early, as I can just walk that way, but it just involves a couple of more turns, because I prefer to be cautious when dealing with other people on the street, especially if I'm all alone. So, as I'm walking down and starting to make the right turn, I see that the man is now walking the opposite way that he was before, and he's now walking towards me, which immediately sets off some big red flags in my head. This guy is probably about 5'11" or 6 feet tall, just wearing a black beanie, a tan jacket, and blue jeans. And I'm a very small girl, only about 5'2", so I knew that if he wanted me, he definitely had a high chance of getting exactly what he wanted. So, I naturally start walking faster, picking up my pace than I was previously, and turn as he's probably 10 yards away from me at this point. And I'm walking really fast, straight down now. I've been walking for about 5 minutes, turning around to check and see if he had made the turn after me, and I didn't see him until the last time that I had turned around. He made the turn and he was walking straight for me. So at this point, I start speed walking, while I'm also on the verge of a panic attack, and all the adrenaline is kicked in, and then so does he. I stay at the same speed for a couple of minutes so I don't tip him off, and let him know that I can see that he's following me. After that couple of minutes, I see my house, and after seeing it, I just book it from there. But before I do turn around one last time and see that he's still sprinting after me. I finally make it into my house and just start crying as soon as I get inside the door, locking it. Luckily after that, the guy didn't continue to pursue, but still, the entire event has been stuck in my mind forever.